Welcome back. Today, we are bringing you a very unique story surrounding a mission to correct a wrongful conviction. It's all coming from our media partners over at Texas Monthly.
So this is a story, give you the background here, about a man who was sent to prison for a crime ultimately we found out he didn't commit, and the juror who would help send him there. Years later, that same juror decided to take a stand and correct the conviction that she was actually a part of. It's called The Juror Who Found Herself Guilty. It was written by Mike Hall, and Mike is joining us today. Mike, first of all, thank you. So you have said that you've covered so many stories on exonerated people, but this one for you is somehow different. Tell us how it was different and how you learned about the story to even begin with.
Yeah, it's, all stories about wrongly convicted people are unique in their own way, but they also have a lot of commonalities. They all have reasons why these kinds of things happen. And what made this story so different, though, was it involved two people, not just one person, Carlos Haile, who was wrongfully convicted, but Estela Ibarra, the woman who many years later helped get him out. So it was like this story of two people coming together, once in a courtroom back in 1990, and then again 33 years later, after she had helped free him. So it was more of a story of this relationship of two people who had been haunted by this terrible thing that had happened back in 1990.
Yeah, it always amazes me. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we heard about it because somebody who worked for the National Center of Exonerations got in touch with somebody on our staff, let them know, because oftentimes when a person is wrongfully convicted and then released, there's a big hubbub about it in the newspapers, and the people make a big fuss about it. There was no fuss at all about this guy who'd basically been kicked to the curb by the El Paso criminal justice system and had gone back to his life up in Chicago, where he had grown up. So we didn't know anything about it. We heard about it through somebody who studied the Texas court system. And then when I, talked with Carlos, I was like, this is a really good story, but if I can get Estela, then it's a great story.
I think as I was jumping in there, I was trying to point out the fact you were talking about the difference in time. And I always think it's so fascinating to see how much time passes, how much time people lose for things that they sit in jail that they're not guilty of. So the moment of reuniting, I bet, was very special. And you guys were there for that, Estela and Carlos, seeing each other. I actually want to show you the moment that meeting happened between the juror and the man that she helped exonerate.
I feel bad because I didn't do it sooner. But
if you didn't do it, I would still be there. And I am so grateful for everything you've done.
That's good.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You're a wonderful person.
But I didn't forget you.
Thank you.
Never.
Such humanity on display there. So, Mike, if we go back to your story, we see how Carlos finds strength in the mantra that he's using to say, listen, when he used to go to work and there was something that gave Estela the strength to speak up after all that time. Again, we talked about time, 27 years after that wrongful conviction. Can you tell us a little bit more about that moment that they shared? Because I imagine it was emotional and transformational for both of them.
Oh my God, it was, I get tears in my eyes even just hearing it, especially when it gets to the end and Estela says, never. She never forgot, even though it took her so long to make that phone call, and that's part of the mystery of the story. It took her 27 years to make that phone call, but she didn't forget. And she, as Carlos says in that clip, if she hadn't called, he'd still be there. And Carlos would probably have died in prison. And so when they finally met, they had been in the same courtroom back in 1990. Now they were in the same room again in the dining room at Estela's little house in El Paso. It was just, it was really intense. They were both really nervous. And when they hugged, it was just like this great weight went off both their shoulders. They were both crying. I was standing off to the side, holding my iPhone sideways, trying not to, start bawling myself. It was just this really sweet moment for these two really singular people.
It's an incredible and a sobering reminder of the great weight that we hold when those of us as citizens sit on a jury, right? I mean, it's such a focal point for those who maybe have served or are going to serve in the future. So this is only the start of the story. Talk to us about what else people who might be watching this right now and are drawn in by what you're talking about, what else will they see in the article?
Well, it's a story about these two people, but it's also a story about the criminal justice system in El Paso. And, I don't think anybody, a cop or a prosecutor, sets out to send an innocent person to prison. People just aren't that evil. But it happens. And so why did it happen in this case? And, you have these well-meaning police and prosecutors and even the defense attorney who knew there was DNA testing going on in this case. This is very early in the DNA era. And they didn't do anything about it. They didn't go out of their way to bring the results forward, even though they knew testing was being done. And it's not because they were doing something evil, but just the kind of neglect of their duties to follow through, to make sure that everything was done right, ultimately led to this terrible injustice and Carlos getting sent away for so many years. And, I think just you get a sense of just how easy it is for a system which is made up of human beings, flawed human beings, to make this kind of mistake and send somebody away. It could happen to anybody. And Carlos was a regular guy, and it happened to him.
Yeah, it can happen to anybody. That's a great reminder. Again, compassion and integrity on both sides, I think, is what is represented here. Mike, we really appreciate you joining us today to chat through this. If you want to read Mike's full article, which you should, called "The Juror Who Found Herself Guilty," it's in the February issue of Texas Monthly. You can read it on their website. We'll be back with more CBS News Texas at 7.